Welcome to The Detail. I'm your host, Cathy Antunes, and you are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. Well, New College is now a different institution in Sarasota County. Governor DeSantis appointed 6 new trustees, and then with the addition of the Board of Governors appointing a 7th, we have a very different Board of Trustees. But I think what was shocking to many in the community, although my guest today, Billy Townsend, will tell me it probably shouldn't have been shocking, right? Billy Townsend is public enemy number 1 is his blog. I highly recommend it. It's on Substack. You've been my guest before, Billy, talking about education. But while I was sitting in the meeting, on the phone of a New College official sitting next to me was the announcement that Richard Corcoran was going to be the president in line from the Miami Herald before the actual conversation of the board. It was stunning. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, I'm still learning about Mr. Corcoran's tenure in education overall. And as the Florida Department of Education secretary, but Billy Townsend, you have written in your Substack blog a really great compilation piece about Mr. Corcoran. So first, thank you so much for being with me today, Billy. But let's just dive right in. What I want to start out by asking you in broad strokes, what do people need to know about Richard Corcoran? This is an important institution in Sarasota. It's a small liberal arts college, but boy, these kids have done well over the years. I know why I'm concerned. What concerns you?
Well, I mean, the thing to know about Richard Corcoran is that he's basically a gangster. And this takeover of New College very much echoes the takeover that he engineered of the Jefferson County public schools. About the same number of kids. That one was a charter takeover. It collapsed in incompetence and fraud, and they gave the public schools back to Jefferson County just last year.
So I'm going to stop you. No, it's okay, because you are diving right in. I know the views expressed here are the views of my guests, and who I'm really grateful to have.
Let me back up. When I say I'm not accusing him of criminal wrongdoing.
No,
I think there is a tendency to think of the New College takeover as an ideological takeover. Like here are these guys who believe all this hardcore right wing stuff. When it really is, I think, mostly just a grift.
Yeah. So here's the deal, because you know what you're talking about. If you never heard of Richard Corcoran, and maybe in Florida, maybe you haven't, but he was appointed by DeSantis as the education secretary in 2018. So under Ron DeSantis, Richard Corcoran has been the head of the Department of Education. And the tail of his tenure, I think he left in 2022, right? And he was involved in an accusation of bid rigging in the education office. And this was to correct a situation with Jefferson County schools. Jefferson County schools, we've talked a lot, Billy, about, on this show about charter schools and the privatization, just as you're referencing. That this is really about making money. It's not necessarily about, and we're talking corporate charter schools. Tell me about Jefferson County, because this is the only school system in the state of Florida that went 100% charter. Why did they do that? When and how did it turn out?
Well, they did that back in 2017 when Richard Corcoran was actually Speaker of the House before he
Okay.
was the elected Speaker of the House. He, along with the current Education Commissioner Manny Diaz, who was a senator at the time, organized a charter takeover of Jefferson County by Manny Diaz's employer, which is a charter company called Academica.
Mhm.
They got a whole bunch of extra money, and they went into this tiny little community, which is basically made up of 3 schools in one, and they have fewer than 1,000 kids,
And
like in
it's
the
right
entire
on,
district. It's
right
Florida's
near,
smallest, right? Yeah,
it's right near
it's right near Tallahassee,
Tallahassee
right,
and
right. It's
Georgia.
right.
Yeah.
It's a very rural, very poor area. Their schools had historically scored poorly on tests,
Hmm.
so they made a really easy target. The charter school came in there with a whole bunch of money for the first year. You could argue some of the numbers got better in the first year, and then they
Hmm.
collapsed. And the charter school, at the end of their five-year contract, bailed and ran. The numbers they left behind, the performance numbers they left behind, were far worse than what they inherited.
Where did it
And
start out, the numbers for Jefferson?
I don't have those off the top of my head, but they were bad. I mean, they're bad in the sense of proficiency. They are generally the worst scoring district in the
Okay.
state. And they're there.
So
Lawrence
now, but
Lawrence Lawrence
this,
has it.
yeah, so this was the result after, right? So in 2017, their scores were already, like you said, the worst in the state.
I
But
think
this
they were in the
is
30s in
okay.
in 2017, but I don't have that off the top of my head. They were definitely not at 19.
Yeah.
Um,
So for those of you who are listening, I am going to put this up on YouTube, but there was a tweet put out by reporter Lawrence Mower saying this was in May of last year, May of 2022. More sad news for Jefferson County, the only school district in Florida to be privatized. So they went 100% charter schools. Only 19% of its third graders passed the state's reading test this year, by far the worst in the state. Last year, it was only 28%, also the worst. So, like, putting Corcoran aside, and we'll get back to him,
right,
but just as a report card on privatization, because we're always told,
right,
oh, the
right.
private sector can do everything better. That
No,
did not work out for Jefferson
no,
County at
no,
all. Yeah.
no.
And they
This
gave
is
it a
really this is
5 years.
yeah. I mean, this is really the first time the private sector ever tried to take on what actual public schools have to do, and they failed abysmally. And I think how this relates to the new college situation. I mean, you have to understand that Richard Corcoran's a very bad executive. He couldn't even organize his own governor's campaign.
Mm.
He ran the Department of Education into the ground, like as an organizational leader, even beyond the grift that happened in Jefferson County. He will not be a competent leader. What he'll be competent at is getting his buddies hooked up with stuff.
Mhm.
It's going to be a few years of open grifting, and then
Mhm.
they'll lose interest and move on to the next thing. Like that's kind of what I would predict. Now,
Mhm.
kids are going to suffer, faculty are going to suffer,
Mhm.
the same way they did in Jefferson, because that's what this racket does. But I think ultimately, new college will probably get a chance to rebuild itself when this is done. I am deeply
Mhm.
skeptical that these guys have in them the work ethic or the seriousness to even build an evil right-wing institution. I think they're far too lazy and far too social media influencer focused to actually do the work of administration to create this thing.
So okay, so here's the thing, because uh just when it comes to education, obviously there's the Jefferson County example, which
Right.
occurred under the tenure of Richard Corcoran as
Right. His
the
project, like
state.
he really wanted it to happen.
Yeah, I want
It's
to
really his
quote
game.
him. Let me
Right.
do that, because he
Right.
says he said His first, last, and only priority has been to ensure the students of Jefferson County receive the high-quality education they deserve. So this was definitely something he put as a showpiece, you know, for what could be done. But I want to go back to your work on Florida's Great Regression, because this too is a huge commentary on what Mr. Corcoran, what has occurred under his leadership in Florida education. So looking at the National Assessment for Education Progress, fourth grade and 8th to 8th grade reading and math scores. I've got 2019, 2018, 2022. Billy, just walk us through the problems for Florida with reading and math under Richard Corcoran.
Well, those actually predate Corcoran. I mean, the entire Jeb era is characterized by artificially high 4th grade, 3rd grade scores that then collapse as kids get older. It's shown on the NAEP, you know, which is what we're looking at now. It's also shown in Florida's own state tests. There was a study done that runs concurrent to the NAEP that showed Florida had the worst quote unquote learning rate in the country of any state. Your kids in this system, which is essentially a racket, grow at a slower rate than any other state in the country as they age through this system.
Yeah, their academic achievements. So just 2019 reading scores in 4th grade in Florida start out at the 4th in the country, but then in 8th grade, the kids are testing that same year, 2019, they come in at number 22. Math, again, Florida, number 4. 8th graders, number 34 in the union. Here's your 2022 compilation. Florida, 4th grade, 2nd in the country when it comes to reading. 8th grade, 18th in the country when it comes to reading. Florida on math in 2022, number 4. 8th grade in 2022, number 31 in math. Now you tied this decline to inflated scores in 4th grade, and you tie it to 3rd grade retention and vouchers. Can you briefly explain what because that ties into the charter school, private school issue as well?
Basically, Florida just gets a lot of kids off the books that don't test well. Florida's got the largest voucher programs in America. Most of those kids are students that don't test well. They are particularly driven out of the public system by 3rd grade retention. They don't want to be retained in third grade. Florida does mass 3rd grade retention. Those kids then come back into the system because vouchers have an enormous 2-year dropout rate. It's 61% of kids abandon their voucher within 2 years, according to the only close to study that's ever been done. Florida very, very on purpose does not study the
they hide their data, don't they?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I honestly think the 8th grade numbers are inflated too. Again, Florida just has a bunch of kids that are off the books. You know, that's if you want to challenge my point of view on that, if you're the state, then come study about. Let's have a real study. And see how many kids there are. They won't even tell you how many kids are retained. You know, you can see here.
Now this we're looking at the change in test scores and how Florida, because you said this predates Corcoran. These are under Jeb Bush's testing and vouchers. What has the impact been on education? So if you're looking, there's a graph out there from the National Assessment of Education Progress, and you created the calculations with their data, that Florida has consistently seen this decline in test scores, whereas a state like Massachusetts, which starts out high and just stays high, right? 4th to 8th grade, their kids are still doing great. It's a really dismal picture here.
You know, Massachusetts creates stability and excellence, and their kids don't slide. our kids, you can see the blue. That's the growing slide. And I think keep in mind, as I said, this is confirmed at Florida with Florida's own state level tests. I mean, the NAEP is a whole different test set that measures different things, but it finds the exact same outcome as the learning rate study. And Florida actually studied this in 2017. It wanted to figure out what was happening in middle school. And what the study came back and said is you're creating chaos in your schools through choice. And it said your teaching corps is struggling because you can't recruit the same number of people that strong states can. And once that state came back, once that study came back, nobody ever talked about it again. I don't know the state ever published it. I had to go find it. I had to go find it on the company that did the study. I don't think it's anywhere in government, a government hosted site. All these things are people protecting. Like, I'm in the course of writing an article in which I say you have to think of the Florida education system as essentially a gangster racket. Like it's not an ideology. It is people protecting a racket. There's a lot of money to be made.
Well,
yeah. It all comes down to
I agree
profit,
with that.
but it's the profit comes in a million different ways. There's a million different ways to profit by seeking to mess up the supply of education services to a public that has insatiable demand for them. And like that's really the story of the Florida racket. And my premise in my piece is that the Florida education system is dead. The racket finally consumed it. And I think what's happening with DeSantis kind of wiping out the illusion that there's any local districts has completely destroyed the system in favor of the racket. And I think we're entering a whole new era of education politics, both in Florida and the country, in which the public's demand, which the racket does not want to provide, that clash is going to define our education politics moving ahead for a long time.
So I want to get back to your article so we can kind of explain, it gives a good picture, because you can say, well, there's a lot of money to be made in education. One of the ways that charter schools profit or pillage education budgets is through the real estate leases. They set up a separate corporation to lease a school to a charter school. They're affiliated corporations. So a corporate charter school, I have read, it's been documented, will charge up to 40% of the school budget for the real estate lease. And then those leases are bundled and sold on Wall Street to real estate investment trusts. But that's not the only way. There's consulting fees, there's educational supplies. So when Jefferson County schools basically collapse, you see a reading, third grade reading scores where only 19% of third graders are reading at grade level in Jefferson County schools. After 5 years of the private sector that's supposed to be able to do everything so much better, they basically tanked the scores even further. So the Corcoran's project is not working. These kids aren't improving. So, and the company backs off, right? They say, we're done. This is academia. Manny Diaz owns this. It's his old company. Richard Corcoran.
He doesn't. To be clear, he was an employee. There's a guy named Fernando Zulueta owns academia.
No, I don't mean
he's a very powerful guy.
I mean, let's just say philosophically, from a policy standpoint, if they're going to be touting charter schools, they've got to own this, right? Like,
yes, correct. I'm sorry. They own this project in a
They own
moral
the
way. Yes.
project. Yeah, that's what I
Right.
mean by own. So, it's accountability. I'm talking about accountability.
Correct.
So Somerset Academy, which I think is the subsidiary or the name
Right.
that was used
It's
by
correct. Yeah.
Academica.
Right.
Okay. Somerset Academy, which had full responsibility, this corporate charter school system for Jefferson County, they bail. They're
Yep.
in June of 30th of 2022. They said, we're out.
Right.
They didn't perform. They don't want anything to do with it. And a private entity can do that, right? The
Yep.
public schools can't do that,
Right.
not that they
Right.
would want to.
Right.
So at that point, there's some discussion like, okay, how are we going to get them back on their feet? What are we going to do? So what do they decide to do? They want to bring in more corporate educator consultants, right? They want to
Yeah.
put
It gets.
together a bid
Yeah.
process.
It gets a little complicated here.
Okay.
They were going to transition back to Jefferson County School Board having control of those schools, and
Okay.
what they were going to impose on Jefferson County schools is something called I think it's called an outside operator or an executive operator. I've forgotten the term now, but it's essentially a consultant. This happens all over the state in districts all over the state. Any school that's a zone school that serves a troubled neighborhood or a low capital neighborhood at one time or another has thrown off the kind of scores that get an external operator imposed on them by the state. Like that's a state rule. If if your test scores come out at X point, you go into a thing called turnaround, and you can have an external operator imposed on you to help run the school.
Okay.
Those things are scams. They were scams when I was on the board in Polk County. We had a few. They're all over. They're all over the state. They're scams.
So why do you say they're scams?
Because they're almost all former educators who like do some coaching here and there. It's very high level trading based a lot of times. Some of them are better than others. There are some that do get their hands a little dirty, but the vast majority of the people at the schools I've ever talked to who worked with these folks said they weren't helpful. Said it's essentially a scam, and it's not really the external operator's fault in a lot of cases. They're not really in a position to do the. I mean, external operator going to be like two people spending a few hours a week at school,
like making recommendations, things like that.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, at best, it could be a helpful strategic assistance and direction. At worst, it's just another headache where
time.
Right. And you get paid a lot of money. I mean, there's several $100,000 a year for these things.
So hang on. So let me just, okay. So we're looking at the fall of 2022.
Right.
And the charter school, Somerset Academica, they're out in Jefferson County. And there's a bid process being set up at the state to do exactly what you're just to have this, some consulting group come in.
Right.
And so there are a few players here. One is Trey Traviesa.
Yeah, he's the leader of a company called MGT.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So MGT is one of the bidders. And then tell me about Jacob Oliva. Who is he?
Jacob Oliva was the chancellor of the public schools of Florida. He was the guy who essentially did the work. Richard Corcoran is the commissioner. Corcoran's sort of the figurehead. Oliva is kind of the guy who does the work.
Now, one of the things, because I'm going to just toss this in there, because when it comes to local government, a lot of times here, we'll talk about real estate developers. There's land use. That's one really important aspect of local government, and where a lot of money goes and fortunes are made. And so you see a lot of former legislators, like Pat Neal is a former state legislator who's local, who's a big land developer. He had a career as a legislator at the state, then he became a real estate developer. What I'm seeing here is, and it goes both ways, people in the corporate education world or consulting world, like Treviza, he used to be a legislator, right?
Yeah. Yep. He's
Okay.
well, he used to be in business with Richard Corcoran some years ago. I got a tip pointing that out to me.
Wow.
And the Tampa Bay Times actually cited me in their story about it. And so what happened was they were going to take the transition from Academica Somerset, the charter school, give it back to Jefferson County, but they were going to impose one of these external operators on it and give the external operator the federal money Jefferson County was entitled to. That is apparently illegal. I mean, that's what was reported. There have been a lot of, there's still a lot that's unknown about what happened there, but the people running the bid process were told to use for the competitive bid they sent out, the DOE government people, a template agreement within GT to do this work. It's like they sent out the statement of work of something already agreed to the competitive bid The bid rigging part comes from the idea that MGT was already selected before there was a bid
Yeah, so just so
before there
listeners,
was an
we've
RFP.
talked about this before, but what do governments do? They put out a request for proposal. The whole idea is to open up the process of selecting a vendor so that the government, the people, right, the taxpayers, get the best person for a reasonable price. Doesn't necessarily have to be the cheapest person or provider, whatever service it is. So you want to, build a road or a sidewalk. So the RFP, request for proposal, puts a scope of work and qualifications, a template that outlines what kind of people can bid, and what kind of services are needed. And what we've seen here locally, we saw it with when the stadium contracts, when Ed Smith Stadium was being done, is that if you can take that RFP and tailor it so that only one bidder can qualify, you're done, right? Then it's a non-competitive process. And apparently that's what was alleged here, that the bid was tailored so that MGT, Trey Traviesa, the former colleague partner, of Richard Corcoran, was the only company that actually qualified, and that Jacob Oliva, this was reported also, gave the specs. So he's the chancellor. He's giving the specs to the employee writing the bid.
Right. He's the guy who ordered the employee to use the pre-written bid. Now he just left. Jacob just left to go be the commissioner of education for Arkansas, for the state of Arkansas.
Okay.
This scandal probably cost him the Miami-Dade superintendency. He applied for that and didn't get it. The state basically. So what blew this up? What made this a crazy thing? Nobody else bid except MGT, because the thing was, it was pretty clear who was going to get it.
And they're out of Tampa.
Except the vice chancellor for the Department of Education and a Board of Education member, Andy Tuck.
Hold on to that, because I just want everybody, if you just joined me, You are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. For 30 years, Legal Aid of Minnesota, with offices in Sarasota, Bradenton, and Venice, has provided free civil legal help for their low-income neighbors in Sarasota and Manatee County by partnering with local lawyers. These are challenging times. If you are facing an emergency with issues like eviction, domestic violence, reemployment, or loss of benefits, Legal Aid of Minnesota is there to help. Information about qualification can be found online at legalaidminnesota.org and by phone at 941-366-0038. My guest today is Billy Townsend. We're talking about the new interim president, who many believe is going to be appointed the president of New College, Richard Corcoran. His tenure as head of the Department of Education in Florida, but specifically the bidding process that really led to him leaving as the Department of Education head. So, Billy, you were just telling me how this bid for a consultant company to basically smooth a transition for Jefferson County schools. Jefferson County schools had gone totally charter, totally private. It was a 5-year failure. Third grade test scores for reading came in at 19% proficiency. It was a train wreck. They were never great, but they got worse with privatization. Right. That's academia. Manny Diaz used to work for academia. Now he's the head of the Department of Education. Right. So it's a train wreck. They decide in their wisdom, Mr. Corcoran and his colleagues, that they want to take federal money and give it to a consultant, hire a consultant to help Jefferson County. That was their idea. And the bid was written with specs taken Mr. Oliva, the chancellor, handed them to an employee, and they were skewed toward MGD Consulting, which is headed by Trey Traviesa, who was a former legislator and friend of Corcoran. Lots of cronyism happening. Right. Okay, so then you said somebody else came in to bid.
Right, which it's still insane. I'm not sure how this happened, but the vice chancellor of the Department of Education, a woman named Melissa Ramsey, who I've come to understand was pretty attached. I mean, she knew what was going on at the Jefferson County schools, and I think actually had pretty good intentions. Like I think she meant well. Mm-hmm. She and a Board of Education member, who was appointed by Rick Scott. I think he would have been. His name was Andy Tuck. He was sort of a rural guy, so he kind of understood rural schools, the challenges of rural schools. They got together and submitted a bid that became the only other bid besides the MGT bid that answered the RFP. Well, apparently that's entirely illegal and unethical, and they immediately triggered.
It's not an arm's length transaction.
No,
is
it? Yeah. Well, I mean, and in their defense, I mean, I think, maybe they didn't understand that and understand that they would be, resigning for what they were doing to do it. Again, I happen to think Melissa Ramsey is the most honorable person in this entire spectacle, but she did walk into this problem. There was a big investigation done immediately. It almost implicated Oliva. He got off, but they never put Corcoran under oath. They never put Traviesa under oath. They never put this guy Ralph Arza, who is a whole other character.
Yeah, we'll get to him later.
We could spend an entire show on Ralph, and I would love to.
I do want to get to him, but
right. So
this
yeah,
whole
right. So this whole thing blows up. Ramsey and Tuck both essentially resign immediately under fire. They're forced out. They resign. They dump the story to Peter Schorsch with Florida Politics, which is a place where powerful people dump their stuff.
They leak.
leak it, right. it was a very benign headline. It said
Mhm.
something like 2 DOE employees resign. I happened to see it on Twitter, and I read the story. I was like, wait, what? And
Mhm.
um, I just proceeded to do a lot of work on it. In the meantime, what had happened was the Tampa Bay Times had gotten wind of how crooked and or sketchy the whole bid process was, even before Ramsey and Tuck got involved in it, and they were working on a story themselves. And they broke the story of the bid rigging part and the Ralph Arza part, and they and this meeting that happened where they supposedly, like, their first story is a blockbuster story. Like, it documents a bunch of stuff. It put the powers that be back on their heels, like I've never seen them be put back on their
Really?
heels. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Um,
Mhm.
they just went into full silent mode. DeSantis, Corcoran, all of them.
Now,
Um,
there was an IG investigation, wasn't there? Inspector General investigation of what happened?
well, they said they were gonna. Um,
Oh, they didn't.
and well, they, as I understood it from various things I was hearing, because I was doing my own work,
Mhm.
like, the key witnesses to this, who were some of the Jefferson County officials, were also sort of being pressured as, like, witnesses by the IG, as being pressured into being the complainants, and that wasn't fair. They hadn't complained. They were
Mhm.
just trying to do their jobs. So I
Mhm.
decided I was going to be the complainant. Um, I actually submitted a formal complaint based on the stories that were in the Tampa Bay Times. I said,
Mhm.
Tampa Bay Times reports this that seems to me to be illegal. Tampa Bay
Mhm.
Times reported this. I submitted it. Um, they actually interviewed me to ask if I knew anything firsthand. I said, no, I'm just reading to you the published,
Right.
apparently somewhat
Mhm.
criminal
Yeah.
behavior that I think. I
Mhm.
mean, of course, like, everybody knew about this. Like, I mean, it was such an obtuse dance of the
Can I
deaf.
just tell you what I find a lot of times in Florida is that I don't know if it's just in Florida, but this is where I live and I see it, is something obviously like there everyone thinks someone else is complaining. Everybody thinks someone else is going to do so, or there must be
Right,
somebody out there that's
right.
enforcing, pack money rules or,
No,
and
no,
the reality is if a citizen doesn't file a complaint, and even if a citizen does,
right, right,
okay, because I
right,
really haven't seen a whole lot happen. We just had a Manatee County commissioner and VIP vaccine, right? And
right,
somebody did file a complaint about that, where
right,
people jumped to the head of the line.
right.
But boy, if you think that there's some overlord that's watching everything and holding people accountable, that's
No, it's the
not what I've
opposite.
seen.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, there are entire classes of people who are protected from law enforcement and other investigations. I mean, like, and
Mm,
that's and the way they do it is through obtuseness. I don't see anything. Like, it's.
mm-hmm.
And so what I was trying to do with my complaining, and I didn't expect them to actually um uh put Richard Corcoran under oath. They should have, but they didn't.
Yeah.
um, I was trying to create a record and clarity
Mm-hmm.
and make, and
Mm-hmm.
I consider it a cover up. I mean, Melissa Ramsey said on the record in the DOE investigation of her that she understood Richard Corcoran alone was going to make the bid decision. He should have been under oath for that. Clarify that. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he wasn't. The after and What happened was the pressure mounted on this a bit, and the governor's spokeswoman, Taryn Finsky, came out and said the governor's IG was going to review the DOE's IG investigation of the whole thing, and that they were going to do a quote all of the above in investigation. She lied. That did not happen. I
So
know,
I want
again.
to just quote.
I know that because I'm a complainant.
You were the
Sorry, go ahead.
complainant. No,
Right,
it's okay. You said you wrote in your Substack articles.
right.
Highly recommend Billy's Substack blog on education in Florida. You wrote, in my subsequent work, it's become clear to me that Melissa Ramsey was the only person involved in the scandal who cared at all what happened to the kids of Jefferson County. Her bid, with all the insider problems that came with it, probably saved the Jefferson schools from more looting by Corcoran's buddies. And then, in your article, it became, as I read it, that the focus of the IG investigation becomes the second bid, the one that actually threw light on, some really bad insider dealing, what appears to be a rigged bid, not the MGT, not the first one.
Correct. That's exactly correct.
Yeah. And there's a way you've used the term open cover up, or I've read that. Can you talk about what you mean?
I mean, I just
same
mean,
idea, basically.
Yeah. I mean, if you are the governor's IG, and you look at the DOE's IG saying Jacob Oliva ordered his subordinate, who was the chancellor, ordered his subordinate to use a template of an MGT agreement for a competitive bid solicitation that only MGT responded to. If you read that, if you read that Richard Corcoran was going to personally oversee the entire bid process, you would want to put those two guys under oath and ask them about that.
Anybody would.
Right. If you were serious about morality or integrity, that's what I mean about open cover up. It's so blatant that it's just like, what are you going to do about it? We're powerful. You're not. And I think again, that comes back to New College. Like what the New College grifters wanted, what Chris Rufo wanted, was one soundbite, and he got it, where kids from New College said, you can't do this, you don't have the, and he goes, unfortunately for you, I do have the power. That's all it was about. It's how you sell yourself as powerful in that grifter world. Again, it's so when I call Richard Corcoran a gangster, that's what I mean. I mean, I'm not passing a legal judgment on him. That has to be decided by anybody who would look into what the Tampa Bay Times reported. I'm saying his mentality is a gangster's mentality. It's nothing but I can stick it to you.
Yeah,
like, I'm gonna bust you out. I'm gonna bust out your school. I'm gonna bust out your college. I'm gonna bust out your community schools. He does it at every level. And what's hilarious is he's got no constituency at all. He's never been elected. I mean, the most votes he ever got for an election were 10,000, I think. Like, he's managed to do this through appointment. Like, people
I didn't
appoint
realize
him.
that he's never been a legislator.
No. He was elected to the legislature,
okay.
but he got like 9,000 votes. It was a tiny little race. It was a special race. Then he kind of parlayed that into being speaker by the way, like, he was Marco Rubio's chief of staff for a while.
Okay, because
so he sort of parlayed those connections into power, like in backroom deals and things like that. His only like legacy as Speaker of the House was the Jefferson County project, and it collapsed in a smoldering heap.
So he was Marco Rubio's chief of staff.
Correct. Yeah.
And we're talking about Richard Corcoran, if you just joined us,
right.
And his tenure and some of the more troubling aspects as head of the Department of Education in Florida. He is now the interim president of New College, and there are signs that he may just well be appointed. He wanted the job at FSU, the president of FSU. This scandal is, I think it's fair to say, that might be other reasons too, but he was not going to get that appointment as president of FSU. Let's get back to Ralph Arza. Ralph Arza is the top charter school lobbyist in the state of Florida, and he works for Florida Charter Schools Alliance.
Correct.
So what we're seeing now with this intention to expand vouchers, right? And to here you have a stunning failure of a wholesale privatization of county schools in Jefferson County, where third grade reading scores proficiency was at 19%. It went down horribly, right?
Right.
So Ralph Arza, who is this guy? Why was he involved?
He's friends with Corcoran. He and Corcoran are buddies, and he's
Okay.
part of that crew. Like, I mean, he's part of the Manny Diaz, Ferns Stulaweda crew. Like, they're sort of a crew. Um, Ralph is a character. Ralph was arrested. Well, let's see. He was convicted of witness tampering after he drunk dialed somebody. I think it was a former legislator. Uh, uh, he was mad at him because he had said something disparaging about Ralph had said something disparaging about the first black superintendent of Miami-Dade County. This is probably 15 years ago now. Ralph drunk dialed this guy, made all with his cousin or his uncle or his brother or some I don't remember exactly who it was, but together they did these really vile racial things. They said threatening things. He ended up being convicted of witness tampering. He was drummed out of the state legislature and then somehow rehabilitated. Like I don't know where you go to get rehabilitated after that, but he went there.
Hmm.
Landed on his feet as the top lobbyist for the Florida Charter School Alliance, who I think was responsible for calling me public enemy number one, which I appreciate. Ralph and I tangled after he had this school he was backing on behalf of the Charter School Alliance in Polk County called Bridge Prep. They wanted to build it in northeast Polk where we have a lot of growth. Long story short, we actually defeated that school in a 3-3 tie because the school board member who was going to vote for it wasn't there. Ralph lost his mind, started sending really angry emails to the women who voted with me against the school. Didn't send one to me, sent one to the women.
Oh, wow.
Sort of intimidating lobby type
So
things.
let me just tell you,
Yeah,
because this is getting more specific about the examples you cited. He resigned from the Florida House of Representatives in 2006. He was forced
right,
to resign. He was charged and convicted of witness tampering
right.
and leaving racially charged, threatening voicemails. He served 18 months probation and agreed not to run for office, um, and resigned. So yeah, that's a pretty amazing comeback for somebody
Right,
that was involved in something
right,
so
right. So
egregious.
so
And
for
he was
sorry.
involved with this bid tampering, or he
Well,
was
he was
overseeing?
well, we don't know what Ralph's exact role was.
Okay.
We know that Ralph was at a meeting that was reported in the Tampa Bay Times that predates the bid submission. We
Hmm.
know that several of Ralph's relatives worked for the for Academica for the Jefferson County schools. He literally had relatives involved. Um,
Okay.
uh,
Hmm.
he We also know in 2018 the Ron DeSantis campaign banished Ralph from a fundraiser, wouldn't let him host the fundraiser because they said he was disgusting, or so his disgusting racial behavior in the past, or something like that. Like,
Hmm.
so Ralph was
So he was
too
a hot
racist and
potato.
disgusting. He was a hot potato in 2018. He was all but a member of the DOE leadership unofficially, throughout or Corcoran's term. He would email us like he when I was on the Polk County board about this bridge prep thing. He sent an email to our lawyer saying he was talking to his friend Richard Corcoran, or he was in Richard Corcoran's office or something like that. Like
Hmm.
he would name drop his power. Um, I just kind of found him amusing.
Yeah.
I once called him the Zelig of grift, or the Forrest Gump of grift in Florida. He just kind of shows
Okay.
up in
He's
everything.
around.
Right.
So I'm going to quote one of the statements you made about Jefferson County, what happened there, and New College.
Right.
You said the looting of Jefferson and New College, of course, you're talking what can happen. is just a much smaller scale example of what Jeb Bush and friends have done to Florida's kids with rigged school grades, meaningless testing, voucher programs with a 61% two-year dropout rate. This is not new. Woke, anti-woke, it doesn't matter. You say Corco Rufo.
Right. Yeah.
So Corcoran, but you say Rufo, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
A little
coming,
portmanteau there.
yeah, coming to grift you. They've always been coming to grift you. Hold on to your wallets. I mean, I understand Jefferson. It's mind-blowing and sad for all those children. And for the society to lose all those minds, right? You know, it takes a lot to
Right.
bring people up to speed when you could be teaching them properly. Hold on to your wallets. What do you think that people at New College, people in Sarasota, all of us need to look to? And my follow-up question is, how in the world wasn't this more of an issue in the governor's race? But talk to me about
what's this? Oh.
I mean, education and
Okay.
what's
Okay,
going
I'll come back
on.
to it.
Yeah.
So what was the first question? Oh, how might they grift New College?
Yeah,
Well,
New College.
I mean, I think as I understand it, they've already hired or said they're going to hire Bill Galvano, former legislator, to do kind
counsel.
of to do some sort of make work job. I don't know if he was a legal counsel or it was.
I think it's legal counsel. They do have a
right.
legal counsel. Yeah.
Right. You know, I mean, they're going to hire their buddies. I mean, that's grifting number one. That's the other part of the grifting, I think, is that they're going to do a lot of YouTube about how they're laying siege to the institutions and turning a progressive college conservative and all that crap. But they won't even do the administrative work to do that. I think I expect them to leave based on the Jefferson County example. They'll just leave a mess. Like it's that, and the state's going to pump extra money into it.
They've talked about that 10 million
right,
at least,
right.
And then I've heard 15 as well. So I don't.
Right. So they can go hire Jenny Thomas or whatever right wing person they want to go hire.
That's a joke, right?
I have learned that my jokes often come true.
Okay.
So I mean I could see. I mean I made a joke about having Matt Gaetz be the director of student life. I could see that coming.
Oh gee. Okay, God.
I could see that happening. I laugh at their ideology because I think it's YouTube level ideology. Now, does it hurt the kids that are there? Yeah. I mean, is it really damaging to vulnerable kids? Yes.
Well, look at the I mean, Jefferson County. My gosh.
Right.
You know?
Right.
We just have a few minutes left, and I know I can't keep you because you have another commitment too. A serious question. Why isn't the Democratic Party all over this? Do you have any idea? I mean, not that we just have this two-party system, right? And so you need, if there's going to be an organization that's going to take this on, where's the Democratic Party? I don't see much coming from them.
No, no, there isn't. And it's kind of a feedback loop with kind of a negative feedback loop with journalism that way. Like I've been implicitly critical of the Tampa Bay Times for not really following up on their work but you got to have help from officials who jump on it. Allison Tant, now she's a Democratic rep who represents Jefferson County now, but didn't when this happened. She got redistricted into it. She did one press availability on this scam during when it looked like they were going to go through with the scam. I mean, even after this, it looked like they were still going to go through it. She did one press availability, and within like 3 days, the DeSantis administration had quietly reversed, I guess, because Corcoran turned into a meek submission. He just
He was
submitted
caught.
meekly. Yeah.
He was caught.
And he went from being defiant and talking a lot of trash in his letters to, oh, we always wanted to help you, and not being able, like at the final meeting where they transferred the schools back to Jefferson without the external operator requirements and with the extra money that Jefferson needed. The Board of Education didn't even let Corcoran talk. They had some other flunky do the talking. That's a measure of how much he was beaten. I think Democrats are unfortunately very focused on. Republicans tend to win in Florida because people think they're winners. Like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm. They're able to sell that they are. I really just have a minute.
Yeah,
and Tant, Representative Tant, so what you're saying is basically with one letter, one pushback,
one press availability, kind of like this. Yeah.
The commissioner and DOE have been fully transparent. Its findings and actions taken by they backed off, right?
Yep.
And Christina Pushaw, who is DeSantis's press secretary, spokesperson, she said Representative Tant's letter is a few weeks late. I think there's such a swagger in the face of something so egregious for these children that until people aren't cowed by this swagger, we're going to get more of this. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that's really well said. That's exactly correct. You have to meet swagger with swagger, and you have to dismiss the idea that any idea these people have matters. They don't mean anything they say, except their money. I mean, except your money. They will say, we believe this and this and this about kids, and turn around and say the diametric opposite thing just to keep scamming you. Like, you have to think of them morally as an organized crime family. Like, you have to think of them that way. If you try to make sense of them ideologically, you'll drive yourself insane.
Well, I think their results speak for themselves. Third graders, the only fully privatized public school system, Jefferson County, after 5 years in 2022, 19% of third graders reading at grade level. I thank you so much, Billy Townsend, for the work that you do. Everybody, you've been listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. For 30 years, Legal Aid of Minnesota, with offices in Sarasota, Bradenton, and Venice, has provided free civil legal help for their low-income neighbors in Sarasota and Manatee County. By partnering with local lawyers, these are challenging times. If you're facing an emergency with issues like evictions, domestic violence, reemployment, or loss of benefits, Legal Aid of Minnesota is there to help. Information about qualification can be found online at legalaidminnesota.org and by phone at 941-366-0038. My guest has been Billy Townsend. Billy, give us your Substack blog.
It's called Public Enemy Number One. You can Google it, and when you link to it or when you access it, you'll be given the option to subscribe for free via email. So
which I did.
So thanks, and you'll get my stuff emailed to you as I write it.
Terrific, and it's great information. Everybody, thanks so much for listening. Be sure to stay tuned for more great public affairs programming here on WSLR. Make it a great day. Yep.